Right, let's get the show started. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Welcome to InRhythm Lightning Talks. I'm your host, Parag Katkar. I'm the head of consulting practices at InRhythm, and we have several awesome Lightning Talks lined up for you in the upcoming weeks. Our Lightning Talks are hosted every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time. And each week, one of our practice area consultants shares their knowledge on the evolving technology trends in the industry that will help you keep learning and growing in your career. And this week, Nikolai Tarasov, who is a senior iOS engineer at InRhythm, is going to share his experience on building apps using SwiftUI and GraphQL. As a lot of you know, SwiftUI is Apple's UI toolkit that lets us design apps in a declarative way. And GraphQL is a powerful query language for the APIs, which gives clients the power to ask for exactly what they need and nothing more. And makes it easier to evolve APIs over time and enables powerful developer tools. So I'm super excited for this talk. So without further ado, let's get it started, Nikolai.
Yeah, thanks, Farag, for a quick introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Nikolai. Today, I'm going to talk about GraphQL, which is one of my favorite topics. And I will cover GraphQL in terms of SwiftUI integration specifically, as I'm an iOS engineer. Yeah, so let's get started. Today we will cover what is GraphQL. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Yeah, we will cover what is GraphQL and what's the difference between GraphQL and REST API, how GraphQL helps to accelerate client app development, and we'll do a quick demo showing how we can integrate SwiftUI app with GraphQL. So what is GraphQL? GraphQL is a query language for APIs and runtime for fulfilling those queries with existing data. So basically, GraphQL provides ability for client apps to ask what they actually want, and server provides that specific data. So with GraphQL, you ask for certain data and you get expected result. So GraphQL is an alternative for a commonly used REST API approach. So REST API approach, it's been for a while in software development, but GraphQL is a modern way of communicating with for client-server communication. Also, GraphQL makes it easier to evolve APIs over time because GraphQL so it doesn't have like a API versioning. Yeah, we'll cover on that later, more in details. Also, GraphQL provides quite powerful developer tools. With GraphQL, you can also provide quite like a descriptive, like a complete description for API, so that's quite helpful for developers. Like if we talk about history of GraphQL, it was created by Facebook back in 2012. So at that time, Facebook was working on their app performance issues on a low bandwidth network. So since with REST API, you get lots of data which you may not need. Especially on low bandwidth networks, it creates some like a load, you get some like unneeded data, and Facebook was thinking how to solve this issue and how to provide the data app actually needs. So they come up with creating GraphQL, and later, back like in 2015, they open sourced GraphQL, and since 2015, GraphQL became quite popular. And according to State of JavaScript 2020 report, it was adopted by 47% of developers, and adoption of GraphQL is quite impressive. Many large companies, many like known names are using GraphQL quite extensively. So that's really cool. So what's the difference between GraphQL and REST API? And through this, we'll know how GraphQL actually helps to speed up app development process. So basically, as I mentioned already, GraphQL helps to avoid over and under fetching of data. So you only, like, client asks only for data client needs. So you don't get data which you don't need actually. And GraphQL also helps to boost communication speed because GraphQL uses a single endpoint. So no more like multiple endpoints, like going back and forth to client and server, but you have a single request from client to the server. You ask for data which you need and you get expected result. Also, GraphQL provides quite powerful developer tools, which is GraphQL. It's called GraphQL. You can you can use GraphQL. It's something similar to like Postman in some way, where you can create requests, you can get the result, and so these developer tools, they're quite convenient when you start developing something. So like I personally used GraphQL every time I've been starting some new feature which involved GraphQL integration. So yeah, that's really cool. And on GitHub there are plenty of extensions for GraphQL, so that really helps our life. I mean, our developer life. It makes our life easier. As I mentioned already, API evolution without versioning. So it's quite easy to add new fields, to remove unneeded fields in GraphQL. So you don't need to like release a new version. So you have like a single evolving version of API. You can add easily. You can easily add new fields. If you don't need some field, you can deprecate it or hide it. So that's also quite convenient. It helps to like have more stable and robust app. Also, one of the main advantages, also from my point of view, is excellent coding experience for developers. It's really cool that you don't have to create models for data from received from server. You can use auto-generated code straight in your views, view models, and so on. We will discuss that. Yeah, so here's one example of GraphQL query. So on the left, you can see the query itself. So here we are asking, like, we're fetching employee data, name, previous employers. We don't ask anything else because we don't need in this certain case. We just need name, and we get only what we asked. On the right, you can see output, which is JSON, and it returns name and previous employers, a list of employers. And so this is really cool because this employee may have like 50 different fields, and why do I need to fetch for 50 fields if I only need name, right? So it's really cool to have to create such a short query and get this expected output. Yeah. So what do I need to know before starting with GraphQL? Of course, it's all sounds good, whatever I explained, but GraphQL, it isn't that straightforward. It requires some learning, especially if you get used to REST API, because it's a little bit different way of thinking. It's like a declarative approach. But I mean, if you like once you get the basics of GraphQL, you understand the principles of GraphQL. It's really cool, and I think you will love it. as I fall in love with GraphQL. Yeah, and if we speak about iOS integration, GraphQL with iOS app integration, there is the Apollo iOS SDK available. And one of the main things to bear in mind that there is like It's a bit complicated, maybe with caching in Apollo, but that's something to learn, to understand. There are different kinds of caching, and I will cover that in the demo. One of the downsides of using Apollo in GraphQL is lots of optionals. So since we're getting data which we need, so it's like a trade-off. We get lots of optionals, but once you get used to it, and you will not probably pay attention, you will just do undropping and all the optionals handling. Yeah, so let's switch to demo. Okay, so here we have a simple SwiftUI app, which uses public GraphQL server. And I will show you just what it does, and then we'll discuss in details the implementation. Actually, I can show you in the simulator. So here we have a text field. We can enter country code, and we get just basic country information. We can get we can type Canada or Great Britain, and we get this data. So how it is working actually? So we have a view, and we have a view module. It's a MVVM architecture. In the text field, we call function from view model, fetch country info. Let's dive into this function. So here we have a published variable, which is the query for fetching country data. And so here we create this query, initialize it, provide country code, and using combine, we're just observing, we're waiting for data and set it here to this country variable. So how it actually looks in general. So in this project, we have a queries GraphQL file. So we provide, we specify query here. So we can give a name and provide fields which we need to fetch. And then when we build the project, the project itself generates all the models for us based on the query. So you can see this API file. It's a file where Apollo automatically generates all the code based on the query we provided and schema. Yeah, so that's, and let me show you. Yeah, so that's the developer tool I was talking about. It's like a GraphQL where you can create queries, mutations. So query basically for fetching data, mutation for modifying data on the server. Suppose we need to get one more field. So let's look what else we have. So country. Let's see. 1 second. Actually, yeah, we can see states, name. Let's run it. Yeah, for this country, we will not see any state. Let's see US. Yeah. So we just provided one more field, states and name, and we get a list of the states here. So same stuff goes if we add it to Xcode project. Let's come here and edit. So once we build it, Xcode will generate model for, like, we'll add this field to api.read file, and we can call this states right from here. For example, let's do this states. So you see it's available here, and we can get first state, for example. Let's run it. So what's, yeah. So what's the yeah, so that's something to resolve. But as you could see that we were able to like get access to states. We can show them in UI. Yeah, so that's how it works in SwiftUI. Let's go back to the presentation. Yeah, so we can sum up on what we discussed, that GraphQL, it's a modern way to communicate with your server. It really helps to speed up client-server communication. It provides great developer experience in terms of coding, saves time. You don't have to create these models, do parsing, like JSON parsing, all that stuff. You just have a single endpoint and create like a fetch request or mutation request, or you can subscribe for changes or watch for changes. So that's also available in GraphQL. GraphQL, it's available across different platforms for for web, for Android and iOS, and in iOS also iPadOS, all Apple platforms. And yeah, as I mentioned, that GraphQL has been growing quite fast and been used by lots of large companies. Yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to cover. Oh, about useful links. Yeah, you can check official GraphQL documentation, Apollo GraphQL client documentation, the report which I was talking about. You can see not only adoption percentage, like GraphQL adoption percentage, but developer satisfaction. And it's quite high. It's not 47%. Developer satisfaction is above 90% for GraphQL, and quite of GraphQL courses on Udemy. Quite a nice course explaining GraphQL and SwiftUI integration, and one more free GraphQL course. You can go through this link, and yeah. So that's all I want to talk about. Any questions, suggestions, or you can share your experience with GraphQL.
I have one question. So I'm confused, like how it would replace REST APIs. So with REST APIs, when I name REST APIs, the only thing comes to my mind is the backend, right? If there is an endpoint, let's suppose written in Java, Spring Boot, and it has an endpoint that we're calling in iOS. So what we're going to do is from the client side, from iOS, we'll just make a endpoint call. If we use GraphQL endpoint to make that REST API call, is that how GraphQL is working?
So basically, like we don't do like REST API call for GraphQL. Let me show you.
Then where the backend is coming from for this? You're
So
fetching some data.
backend, it's supposed to be like a GraphQL server. So on the backend, yeah, we need to have a GraphQL server, and yeah, so it's like a completely different setup on the server side. So it's like it requires some backend work. You can have like a single GraphQL server, and you can use it across different platforms. And from the client side, you don't create a REST API call, but you just initialize GraphQL client, and I can actually show here. So we have GraphQL client, and we have a single endpoint. So basically, in a real app, we may have probably 2 endpoints, one for QA, one for production, but that can be handled on the config level. So basically, it's a single endpoint, and we initialize GraphQL client here. So yeah, so we can have like a caching stored in SQLite, or we can have like in memory caching, and we can also create like Apollo interceptor and add our custom headers. So sometimes it's required to add some like extra authorization or some additional information. So I just added this as an example. Yeah, so it's completely different, yeah, from REST API.
So looks like the backend project also needs to be infrastructured with GraphQL, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. Got it. Got it.
Any other questions, guys?
Anyone work with GraphQL? Would be good to hear your experience. Parag, you mentioned once you've been working with GraphQL, right?
Yeah. So I was consulting like this was like couple of years ago at American Express, and we had a React front end, we had a Node backend, and that's where we had the REST full services. We used it, but what my learning was that the use case needs to be there. We use it, but we felt it was an overkill because we didn't have the user interfaces to take full advantage of that. So we use it because you know how developers are. We want to use the latest technologies, but then I mean, REST is pretty powerful as well. I felt there is a place for both, and yeah, you need to find the right use case. It's really powerful if you wanna use different views for the same data, or you wanna filter down data. You wanna have like a less amount of data, smaller screens for say iOS app versus a website. Then you can basically filter down the GraphQL queries and pull different data and just use the same backend. So it is a lot powerful in that way.
Yeah,